Coach Tony, over 50, men's fitness. Today I want to talk about something that's very important, and it's called hip to waist ratio. Now, as older men, 50 and older, oftentimes our distribution of fat has changed somewhat. We may have more internal body fat, more fat around our waist, and our waist to hip ratio, even if we weigh the same as we did when we were younger, has changed because our fat percentage, our body fat percentage has actually increased. So even if you was 175 when you graduated high school, or 180 when you got out of the military, and you still weigh that, the fat to muscle ratio has changed, your hip to waist ratio has changed. And so that's why I wanted to talk about this, because it's really easy to figure out. You simply take your waist circumference, which is right above, just above the navel, and your hip circumference, which is going to be the largest area going around the buttocks and thigh area, upper thigh area. So you'll take that measurement and then the waist measurement, and you'll divide the waist by the hip circumference. So as we look right here, we can see that WHR, waist to hip ratio, is an important indicator of body fat distribution and health risk. A higher waist to hip ratio indicates that more fat is stored around the waist, which is associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and certain types of cancers, as well as metabolic syndrome. Now, what I've done is I've taken a few healthy ratios, and if you look at these, you can see down here a 32-inch waist with 40-inch hips would be a 0.80, because we would divide 32 by 40 and come out with 0.80. A 34 waist with 42-inch hips would be a 0.81. 36-inch waist with 43-inch hips, a 0.84. And as you can see, these are all considered healthy. Now, the unhealthy ones are right here, and we have 40-inch waist with 44-inch hips, which is a 0.91. 42-inch waist with 46-inch hips, a 0.91. And a 44-inch waist with 46-inch hips, which is 0.97. Now, sometimes you may have noticed, maybe you see somebody and they have extremely thin legs, and then they have a great big, what most people would call them, a beer gut. And that beer gut, you can tell, is extremely large in comparison to their waist. Well, guess what? If you was to take that, let's say they had a 44-inch waist and 40-inch hips, that's a 1.05. So now they should be concerned about that, because there's a lot of risk factors involved. And while the waist to hip ratio is not a perfect measure of your health risk, other factors, such as your body fat percentage, muscle mass, play a role. But again, you should consult with a healthcare professional. But this is something that you can do at home. You can literally, with just a flexible tape, you can literally measure your waist, measure your hips, and take the waist measurement and divide it by the hip measurement, and you get that percentage. And if you're below 0.9, you're doing good. Now let's look at this, some excerpts from this other article over here. And we have on Healthline, we see that in a 2001 study, they found that the waist-hip ratio is an accurate tool for predicting hypertension. And in 2015, it showed that an increased waist-to-hip ratio is a better indicator than BMI for predicting complications in trauma patients. So again, 2008 study shared that a high WHR was a significant predictor of death in women with heart failure. And also, the researchers, they didn't find a link between the waist to hip ratio and men with heart failure. In a 2006 study found that a high waist to hip ratio was associated with hypertension and diabetes. So we want to definitely, and this is something that we could do by just simply losing fat. Think about it. Some of your fat is internal. It's not all external. So losing fat, a portion of that is going to be lost. That is internal. Now, again, I'm looking down here, and I'm seeing here in this hip to waist to hip ratio chart, low, moderate, and high risk. And we see that high risk is 1.0 or higher. So if your waist and your hip is the exact same measurement, then you have a high risk of certain diseases and problems. So looking up here on this particular one from Healthline, we see that a 2021 show that people who carry more of their weight around their midsection and apple-shaped body may be at risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and premature death than people who carry more of their weight in their hips and thighs, a pear-shaped body. So even if your BMI is within a moderate range, your risk of disease may be increased. Now that's according to the World Health Organization, which again, they have 0.9 or less for men and 0.85 or less for women. So what do we want to do? We want to strive to eat right. We want to exercise regularly, walk daily, and we want to make sure that we keep that waistline trim. So that's what I have for you today, because this is something that you can get started with immediately and really work on that. And it'll improve your overall health and longevity. This is Jake Toney, Over 50 Men's Fitness, signing off. Till the next time, please like, share, and subscribe.